So it's my pleasure now to introduce Fred Kraybill, who's here on behalf of his candidate. Fred is a nursing supervisor at the VA Medical Center with a background as an electrical technician.
Yes.
An interesting combination right there. 9 years ago, he was inspired by Who Killed the Electric Car? Not enough people saw that. Right. But clearly it made a difference because he began to take an interest in electric vehicles. From there, renewable energy, and from renewable energy to the issue of climate change, and have been very active in a wide range of climate action groups, especially focused on solar and wind power.
Yes.
And I'm going to let you, why don't you start, Fred, just by saying a word, broadly speaking, about your candidate and how he would approach sort of the set of energy issues.
Well, the two main things to look at in Joe's background is the fact that he was an admiral in the U.S. Navy and he has the experience in the military. And the military is really recognizing climate change as a serious threat now. They're considering it as a threat that they will have to deal with. And they're even, it has many, many implications for the military. And the Navy is actually raising the piers in the Virginia Naval Base because of the threat of sea level rise. Just one example there. So Joe's military background, uniquely gives him the position to understand climate change. And he worked, the other major thing in his career was working in the U.S. House of Representatives, representing a district in Philadelphia. And he spent, during his time in the House of Representatives, he supported renewable energy, action on climate change, worked hard on energy issues. So those two things in his background.
So let me ask this question that I found very interesting in the presentation by the Premier of South Australia about leadership and the importance of trying to build a constituency around a policy that can be contentious. And whether either your candidates tried to address that directly or whether there are cases in which you would cite things that he's done around this notion of how do you build a consensus on an issue like climate change, which, while the scientists, if we took a poll here at Carnegie Mellon, would probably be pretty consistently in support, but at the grassroots level, it still is contentious.
Right. Well, one thing I first would mention was that when he was elected to the House of Representatives, he was in a Republican-leaning district. So, Joe Sestak has a broad appeal to a wide sector of voters. And the other thing that we're really seeing in climate change is you're seeing both parties are recognizing the need to act on it. It may be a little harder to see on the Republican side, but you now have these mayors of cities in southern Florida that are recognizing the already intruding waters at high tide that are affecting them. And they are actually going and talking to some of these presidential candidates and asking them, what are you going to do about this situation, which is related to climate change. So the point that I'm trying to make is that Joe has been a person who has, he won in a Republican-leading district, so he has a broad appeal. He obviously can work on both sides of the aisle. And number two, he's one of the hardest working people in the House of Representatives ever. And I've been a supporter of his campaign since 2010, and this last round that he's been running, he took a walk all the way across Pennsylvania. He walked all the way from one border of Pennsylvania to the other, and he made campaign stops all the way. And I would have to say that is a rare politician that would do something like that and really get out there and meet the people in that way.
Does he support the Clean Power program?
100% supports the Clean Power program behind the plan. And layered on top of that is the COP21 agreement, which almost 200 nations agreed to limit warming of the planet to 2 degrees Celsius at the very worst, and try to reach 1.5 cc's if it's all possible to strive for that. So Joe is a supporter of that, and that is that relates to the Clean Power Plan, because that is one of the central policies that the U.S. is doing to address climate change, along with other things like the mercury and air toxics rule and various EPA rules and others. But
so if there were a treaty requirement that in this area that needed to be confirmed by the Senate, he would be a supporter. Is that
absolutely yes?
Your sense of it?
Yes.
One of the questions about renewable energy that is now being debated in Washington is whether it's necessary to continue subsidies, the tax benefits, the tax incentives, and others for renewables.
Well,
have you taken a position on that issue?
Yes. In December, as you may know, the Congress extended the renewable energy tax credits for 5 years, both wind and solar. Wind is more on a taper. The solar was like at 100% for 5 years. So Joe 100% supports the extension of the renewable energy tax credits. In addition to that, he feels we're not spending enough money on research and development of renewables. That's something. So he is really calling for, we want to eventually strive for 100% renewable energy, and it's doable. That is a long-term goal, though. But so he is.
So would this be focused on the Department of Energy? Would it be a mandate across the federal agencies? How do you think he would approach this notion of increasing federal R&D?
Yeah. So really, the two main things that I discussed with the policymakers at Sestak's campaign was that they're looking for a carbon fee. They're looking for a cap and trade program, because really, in reality, you have to put a price on carbon pollution. You have to, so you have to cap it and you have to put a price on it. So that would be number one, and number of the most important policies to address this, I would say. And that will open the market for renewables as they become less expensive, and they already are. They already are becoming less expensive. And number two would be he's calling for a moratorium on new fracking wells, because of, well, I can get into that later, but that would also make wind and solar more competitive in the marketplace, because we really feel that the solution to pollution is renewable, and it's doable.
It's very good. Our bumper stickers. But I'd like to go back to areas where federal investment can be helpful. We talked a bit earlier, and the Premier talked about this, DOE, but I'm thinking about this issue of storage. I mean, when we get to renewables, that will become an issue. And so how do you think, how does Admiral Sestak think we should proceed on that?
Yes. So let me go back a little bit. I mean, we already have 20 gigawatts of pumped hydro storage in this country. We have natural gas peaker plants, and we already have all this infrastructure that we have built to help the baseload power plants, coal plants, and nuclear plants be able to function in an electrical grid that has spiking demands. Like during the day, the demand can go up 2 or 3 times as much. So we have built to accommodate coal and nuclear and other sources. We have built a grid that makes it work with peaker plants, with storage. So, we feel we need to build the same kind of grid for renewables if that's what we want to move to cleaner energy sources, and part of that would be storage. And there's already a lot on the grid that can help to manage the intermittency of renewables.
Is there importance in having more distributed power, being less dependent on a grid in a time of terrorism and terrorist threats and cyber hackers and things like that?
Yes. Well, if you'll allow me
that's completely off script here, but you just brought it to mind.
Well, yeah, if I may take the liberty, these aren't exactly things I discussed with the Sestak campaign, but I'm sure he would agree with them. I think you're going to see two things in the renewable energy sector happen. You're going to see distributed generation. We already have 900,000 roofs in this country that have solar on them. That's distributed generation, which will open the possibility for microgrids, which could be resilient communities, local communities in case of a Hurricane Sandy or something like that, But in addition to that, I think you'll also see a huge grid effort to make have high voltage power lines that will distribute renewable energy over a wide area. You're already starting to see that in the Midwest. You have the Rock Island Clean Line they're working on building, the Grain Belt Express, the Plains and Eastern Line. These are high voltage lines to bring wind power from the windswept Midwest to the east. And then there's a project in Clovis, New Mexico to help connect all three grids in the U.S., the East Grid, the West Grid, and Texas. And it will use high voltage DC to help move renewable energy from remote areas to the areas where it's needed, and it will help to drive down the price of renewable energy. So you'll see both, I think. You're going to see distributed happen, and you're going to see large-scale, utility-scale wind and solar. It's already happening, really. I mean, if you look at the state of Texas, Texas has 16,000 megawatts of wind power on its grid, another 7,000 under construction, and they will easily coast to 20% of their electricity from wind in the very near future. This is from a state that's the largest emitter of carbon dioxide in the nation. So the important thing for people to realize is we have 10 or 15 states in this country that are aggressively moving and showing the way on renewable energy. So the Clean Power Plan will help get some of these states that are laggards and are not moving nearly as fast. Will help get these states moving in that direction too.
Yes, I found it interesting that the Premier of South Australia pointed out that states and local communities seem to be acting more aggressively in the area of development of renewable resources, setting more ambitious goals in terms of climate or in terms of carbon emissions than national governments.
Right. Yeah. I live in a section of Pittsburgh here that's run a campaign called Solarize Allegheny. It was basically a campaign to educate people about solar, and we were able to double the number of solar installations in Point Breeze, in part of Pittsburgh here, through that campaign. So that is happening too.
In terms of hydraulic fracturing, you mentioned that your candidate has called for a moratorium
on new fracking.
Just on new fracking.
Yes, new fracking.
And how does he feel about the Halliburton Amendment? I mean, will he advocate repeal?
Yes, he advocated repeal for that. He actually had co-sponsored an act when he was in the House of Representatives called the FRAC Act, I believe it was, which was working to repeal that loophole because there definitely are problems with water contamination.
And is he taking a position on the types of tax that should be levied on this natural gas production?
Yes, so he's calling for the moratorium until the regulatory environment can be in place to safe fracking, and when that does happen, he is calling for a 4.5 to 5% severance tax on natural gas because, as John Hanger mentioned, that other states are doing this. This would be nationwide, of course, as a senator.
And who would have the responsibility for, in his perspective, who would have the responsibility for making the determination about the safety of fracking? I mean, is that a Department of Energy issue? Is that an Environmental Protection Agency issue? This is a classic, mostly one of the dilemmas in Washington.
Yes.
Who is responsible?
I'm not a policy expert like John Hanger is, but I would have to say EPA, mostly. Yeah.
So the other one would look to the EPA for action on that score. I ask, again, off script, a question about the kind of international perspective of the candidates, because as we heard from the Premier of South Australia, in the end, this is an issue that isn't going to be solved even by one nation or a small group of nations acting together, but it is a global concern. Do you want to say a word about your candidate's international perspective as you understand it, and how you think it might play in this area?
Well, I just think it's amazing that you look at a country like India. The Prime Minister of India, Modi, came from the most solar state in India, Gujarat, and he has stated, so you have leaders all over the world that are addressing this problem, and he has stated that India wants energy that won't melt glaciers. And the nation of India has committed to 100 gigawatts of solar by the year 2022, which is an astounding number. China is now installing renewable energy so fast that their grid literally cannot keep up with the wind and solar farms that they have. The grid is, they sometimes have to curtail their energy. This past year, China installed 30 gigawatts of solar, about 18 gigawatts of wind, 30 gigawatts of wind and about 18 gigawatts of solar. And no nation has ever installed that much. So these are all things that Joe supports, and Joe is very much, because as I said, he's looking for 100% renewable energy. That's our long-term goal, and we need to continuously make progress to that goal.
When you say long-term goal, give me a sense of whether that's, for some of us, long-term might be two terms in the Senate, say 12 years, and for others, long-term might be a generation, 20 years or 40 years, whatever.
Right. I would think it would, I think since he's supporting the COP21 agreement, and the COP21 agreement goals would very much line up with goals for renewable energy. I can't give you a specific date. I don't have that from the campaign, and I don't want to take a guess.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I respect that. So, is there a sense in terms of, I'm going to think a little bit about where we are in fossil fuels. The issues now have to do with exploiting offshore resources, things of that kind. Has your candidate taken a position on?
Yes, he is not in favor of extending to offshore and other areas when there's a lot of land under lease for extraction of fossil fuels that isn't even being taken advantage of. So he is opposed to Arctic drilling and the expansion into new areas. One of the questions that I should have asked John, and it occurs to me now, is the Supreme Court has addressed the president's authority in areas that impact energy policy. Has your candidate spoken to that question at all of the president's authority? Forget the Supreme Court for a moment, because I don't want to raise something that we haven't asked of the other candidate, but just in terms of the president's authority to act in this arena, and how might he feel about that? Yeah, specific examples like EPA, the Clean Power Plant. Yes, Joe would support pretty much what the Obama administration has been doing on climate change. And if I may go to the Department of Energy a little bit, you had talked a little bit about this, some people say we shouldn't have a Department of Energy. I would just like to highlight when you look at the solar industry and how it's been advancing in this country. I recently read an article about solar where for the last 15 years, you look at solar in this country, and it's for the first, from like 2001 to 2009, solar was growing sort of incrementally every year. And then around 2009, it just started exploding. And if you go back to that year, one thing that did happen was that the Department of Energy gave loan guarantees to some of the first utility-scale solar farms in the country, maybe in the world. And so the point is that, and these utility-scale solar farms were able to come online, and really, at that point, solar really started exploding. Now, once those first solar farms were built, those loan guarantees were not needed for subsequent solar farms that came online. And you can definitely see that that loan guarantee program from the Department of Energy had an impact, and it helped to launch the solar industry in this country and make it much more, grow a lot more to become a viable industry in the power sector. So that, I think, is one example of a very important function of the Department of Energy. They also gave loan guarantees to a company called Tesla, which has been very successful and paid back their loan guarantees early. But it seems like all people ever hear about that loan guarantee program from the Department of Energy was a company called Solyndra, which was not successful and failed. But this program that the Department of Energy initiated, they knew up front that there was going to be some successes and failures, but they were investing in new projects and new technologies to help move this country toward a clean
So
energy
from your
future.
perspective, you believe that Admiral Sestak would support a federal policy that did encourage market efforts in this field, understanding that there was some risk involved in that.
Exactly, exactly. Because if you look at it in how has made the solar industry successful in this country, and John Hanger mentioned it, we broke a record last year for solar in this country, 7.2 gigawatts installed in this country, and they're predicting next year will be 16 gigawatts, and that's a huge jump. And a lot of that will be utility-scale solar farms that were never built until about 2009. So solar is entering a position now. Energy is a moving target, and solar is moving into a position now where, 15 or 20 years ago, it was a joke. It was nowheresville. Now it is a definite competitor in the energy markets, and you have states that are leading the way on it. With the advent of the Clean Power Plan, we hope to get all the states leading the way on clean energy.
So I'd like to take advantage of the experience you mentioned in your neighborhood.
Yes.
In this area of solar, in terms of what does it take to persuade people that there's value in having rooftop solar?
Yes. Well, that's exactly what this Solarize campaign is all about. It's a campaign to educate the public about how solar works, So there's a number of things that people don't understand about it, and one of them is that you never lose a kilowatt hour of your electricity. Either when you generate it on the roof, you use it at the time of your generation, or you net meter it back to the utility and you get credit for it. That's one.
That requires a policy
right.
at the state public utility level that would allow
that requires a state
right.
Level public policy, and 44 states in the union do have net metering policies of various degrees. They all are a little different, but that is a very important policy that drives solar. But one thing that the public should understand is that solar my house, I have solar at my house in these 20 homes in Point Breeze. On a hot summer day when the air conditionings are blaring, we are not using any of the utilities' electricity, and we are sending extra electricity to the grid. And that is the most stressful time for the light company on those hot summer days when all those air conditioners are blaring.
Bring it back to Senate campaigns.
Yeah.
Do you see your candidate as an effective advocate on behalf of policies like this that could benefit from having a national standard,
right.
for example, on how we treat rooftops?
When Joe was in the House of Representatives, he supported a 25% renewable energy standard that didn't end up passing, obviously. And as I said, he supported the policy of cap and trade, which would put a price on carbon pollution to help renewables be more effective in the marketplace. He has multiple ways he has supported policies that would help solar and renewable energy.
Let's assume that your candidate is elected to the United States Senate. What do you think the first energy-related initiative is that he would be advocating and he'd reach out to his colleagues and try to do something about?
And his top two are the cap and trade, and the second is the moratorium on fracking are his top. But
so you want to see a national moratorium on fracking? He thinks that
new fracking wells, yes.
On new fracking wells.
Yes, and in addition to that, he's been a supporter of multiple policies for clean energy. I mean, in a difficult environment in the Congress where it's hard to get things passed, Joe would be a supporter of, secondary level policies, third level policies that at least could gain support.
Is there a question I haven't asked you that you'd like to answer on behalf of your candidate? I don't want to
right.
miss something for you.
Right. So I think that pretty much covers it. I would just say I had a discussion with him one time. Well, okay, let me do two things. First of all, people may think that the cap and trade program died in the Senate in 2009 with the American Clean Energy and Security Act, but it's important to note that the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a cap and trade program with 9 states in the Northeast, has been operating for about 4 or 5 years. So just so people understand, this is not something that would be totally new. It's being done. It's been done for about 4 years, and it was very effective.
So they can't argue that it's un-American, right?
That's right. And amazingly, it was instituted by Governor Pataki, a Republican governor of New York. In 2004, before this issue became so red hot. Okay. The other thing is that California has a cap and trade program as part of the 2005 Global Warming Solutions Act that was eventually put into effect by the California Air Resources Board, I believe, and they have a cap and trade policy also. So this is being done around the country, and as in many policies that go through Congress, it's something that moves through the states first, and then it happens in Congress. And I think people may be surprised at how quick this issue is going to move, because we already have Republicans that are coming out, Gibson in, I believe it's Florida, and a number of others that are coming out and there's a group that created a Republican caucus that sees climate change as a serious issue. So we could see serious movement on this issue in the future, and Joe Sestak would be at the forefront of that.
Okay. You said a couple of things, so I'm going to get one. That's one.
Yeah.
To give you another.
Well, I would like to highlight so Joe wants to get 100% renewable energy at a certain point. So I just want to talk a little bit about how viable wind and solar is right now. People don't realize that if you haven't been following the energy industry, worldwide, there is 435 gigawatts of wind power installed worldwide, and this last year was a record-breaking year of about 60 gigawatts of wind power worldwide. Solar, which, as I said, was nowheresville 15 years ago. Today, it's over 200 gigawatts of solar, and it's more than just that, because it's kind of still not a large percentage of our electricity, but it's more than just that. It's the fact that energy is a moving target. It's the fact that the prices are competitive, and it's the fact that a lot of the new generation that you see is wind and solar today. So we're moving rapidly to a clean energy future. So when Joe supports 100% renewable energy, I want people to understand that it's doable.
Do you think that conservation is losing traction in this process as an element of policy to achieve a clean energy world?
You're right. It is a very important part of it, and it should be emphasized too. Energy efficiency and energy conservation are also very important ingredients. And so going back to the Clean Power Plan, that's the beauty of the Clean Power Plan. It allows the states to make those choices. I believe here in Pennsylvania there was an act that it's 129 or 129 that encouraged conservation of energy resources and helped to reduce our consumption. And so yeah, that's why the Clean Power Plan helps a lot. And the fact that the cap and trade program, that would also encourage conservation.
So that music, if we were at the Oscars, that music would mean we're coming to the end of the presentation.
Yeah.
I just want to say that I've enjoyed the chance to visit with you, Fred. I think that you've given us a very thoughtful presentation on behalf of your candidate.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks for taking the time to be here.
Okay,
thank you.
Okay, good.